He never expected to find his son at a Navy SEAL graduation, a son he never knew existed, hidden from him by his own parents' lies for 22 years. Graham Whittaker had it all: wealth, success, power. But nothing prepared him for locking eyes with Naomi Ellison, the high school sweetheart his family tore away from him, standing beside a young man with his exact same eyes. What do you say to the child you never knew you had? How do you build a relationship when deployment could send him into danger at any moment? And what happens when old feelings resurface between former lovers, reunited by the son they share? Subscribe now and comment "Found" if you've ever discovered a life-changing secret that turned your world upside down, because this family's journey is just beginning. The California sun shone bright over the Navy SEAL graduation field in Coronado. Families filled the rows of seats, their faces beaming with pride. Some dabbed tears from their eyes while others checked their phones, taking pictures they would treasure forever. Graham Whittaker adjusted his blue tie and walked confidently across the field. At 39, he moved with the ease of someone used to being important. His dark suit was expensive but not flashy. As a millionaire tech founder and major donor to veteran causes, he'd been invited as a special guest to the ceremony. An escort led him to the VIP section near the front. "Right this way, Mr. Whittaker," the young officer said, gesturing to a reserved seat. Graham nodded his thanks and sat down, crossing one leg over the other. He glanced around casually at first, taking in the scene. Proud parents, nervous siblings, grandparents clutching small American flags. That's when he saw her. 22 years had passed, but he would know her anywhere. Naomi Ellison, his high school sweetheart. His first love, his ex-wife from their brief teenage marriage. Graham's breath caught in his throat. Naomi looked even more beautiful now than she had at 17, her dark skin glowing in the sunlight, her curly hair cut in a stylish bob that framed her face perfectly. She wore a simple navy blue dress and sat with perfect posture, her eyes focused on the stage. But it wasn't Naomi who made Graham's heart stop. It was the young man standing beside her, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing the distinctive uniform of a Navy SEAL graduate. The young man had Graham's eyes, his jawline, the same way of standing with shoulders squared. He looks like me, Graham thought, his mind racing. His fingers gripped the back of the seat in front of him so hard his knuckles turned white. The young man, he had to be 22, stood proudly in formation with his fellow graduates. Graham couldn't take his eyes off him. The resemblance was unmistakable. This was his son, a son he never knew existed. Graham wanted to jump up, to rush over, to demand answers, but the ceremony was already beginning. The commanding officer approached the microphone, and everyone fell silent. For the next 15 minutes, Graham heard nothing. His eyes remained fixed on the young man while his mind filled with questions. Why didn't Naomi tell him? What was his name? Did he know about Graham? The announcer's voice finally broke through his thoughts. Families, please join your graduates for the traditional trident pinning photos. Graham stayed glued to his seat, breathing slowly to calm himself. He watched as Naomi approached the young man, pride radiating from her face as she hugged him tightly. Graham made his way through the crowd, his heart pounding in his chest. The post-pinning photo area behind the stands was packed with happy families posing with their new SEALs. Naomi spotted him coming. Her body tensed immediately, and she shifted slightly as if to stand between Graham and the young graduate. The protective gesture wasn't lost on Graham. The young man, his son, stood nearby with a group of fellow SEALs, his posture perfect, his face calm. Up close, the resemblance was even more striking. Graham approached Naomi first, stopping a respectful distance away. "Naomi," he said softly, "it's been a long time." The air between them felt electric with tension. Naomi's expression was guarded but not hostile. "Graham," she replied with a small nod. He glanced toward the young man, then back to Naomi. He didn't need to ask the question out loud. "Is he?" was all he managed to say. Naomi's eyes never left his face. "Let him finish with his unit photo. Then we'll talk." Graham nodded, shoving his hands into his pockets to hide their trembling. He stepped back, giving them space. The young man joined his teammates for a group photo. Graham noticed how the others seemed to respect him. He had a quiet confidence that reminded Graham of Naomi. A few minutes later, the young man headed toward another photo setup. Naomi turned to Graham and nodded toward a shade tent at the edge of the field. 5 minutes, she said. Over there by the shade tent. Graham paced near the shade tent, checking his watch repeatedly. Every minute felt like an hour. Finally, Naomi approached, her arms crossed over her chest. His name is Eli, she said without preamble. Eli Ellison. And yes, he's yours. Graham felt like someone had knocked the wind out of him, even though he'd already guessed the truth. Why didn't you tell me? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Naomi's laugh held no humor. I tried, Graham. Signed your year after your parents forced us to break up and get that quickie annulment. I called you every day for 2 weeks. Graham shook his head, confused. I never got any calls. Your parents blocked my number, Naomi said. Then I got a letter, supposedly from you, saying you'd moved on and wanted no contact. When I came to your house, your mother said you were at some fancy prep school and didn't want to see me. Graham felt sick. I never wrote any letter. I figured that out eventually, Naomi said. But by then I'd already moved to my aunt's place in Oakland. I had Eli when I was 18. I raised him myself. No lawsuits, no public drama. Just survival. Graham ran a hand through his hair, his mind reeling. My parents did this? They kept my own child from me. Naomi's expression softened slightly. They never thought we were right for each other. A poor black girl from the East Side and their precious son headed for Stanford. That wasn't their decision to make, Graham said, anger rising in his chest. No, Naomi agreed quietly. It wasn't, Graham took a deep breath. Can I meet him? Talk to him? Naomi looked over her shoulder to where Eli was finishing up with photos. If he wants it, she said. It's his choice now, Graham nodded. That's fair. They fell silent as Eli approached, his graduation helmet tucked under his arm. His expression was respectful but guarded as he looked between his mother and the stranger who couldn't stop staring at him. Eli, Naomi said. This is Graham Whitaker. Eli nodded politely but said nothing. His eyes, so much like Graham's, studied the older man carefully. It's good to meet you, Eli, Graham said, his voice thick with emotion. I'm sorry I haven't been here. My mom explained some things, Eli replied, his voice deep and measured. Graham took a breath. I want you to know I had no idea about you. If I had known... You don't need to make excuses, Eli said, not unkindly. What matters is what happens now. Graham nodded. You're right. He hesitated, then added, I'd like to get a DNA test, not because I doubt I can see myself in you, but just to make everything official. Eli's expression remained calm. We can. It won't change who raised me. He glanced at his mother. It might change what you do now. The implication was clear. Actions would speak louder than words. I understand, Graham said. Could we maybe get lunch? Off base, somewhere quiet? If you're both willing. Naomi looked at Eli, who gave a small nod. After the reception, Naomi said, there's an official gathering first. They exchanged phone numbers, and Graham tried to contain his emotions as he entered his son's contact information for the first time. I'll be there, Eli said. His voice neutral but not cold. They separated for the formal reception, Graham watching as Naomi and Eli walked away, still trying to process how dramatically his life had just changed. The base reception lawn buzzed with activity. Graduates in their formal uniforms mingled with family members and distinguished guests. Refreshment tables lined one side, offering cookies, punch, and coffee. Graham kept his distance, watching from afar as Eli was congratulated by his teammates and their families. He didn't want to intrude on this moment. The young man had worked incredibly hard to become a SEAL, and this was his day of celebration. Naomi circulated nearby, stopping occasionally to chat with other parents. She seemed well-liked and at ease, though Graham noticed how her eyes frequently found Eli in the crowd, checking on him. Graham pulled out his phone and searched for a suitable restaurant, somewhere quiet and family-oriented, not flashy. He found a small coastal diner with good reviews and texted the address to both Naomi and Eli, suggesting they meet at 12:30. A moment later, he saw Naomi check her phone and give a small nod in his direction. Her approval meant more to him than he expected. As the reception began winding down around noon, Graham saw Naomi and Eli in conversation. Eli looked his way briefly, then back to his mother. We'll meet him there, Naomi said, just loudly enough for Graham to hear. "Okay," Eli replied, his expression unreadable. Graham left first, walking slowly to his rental car. His hands were shaking as he started the engine. In 20 minutes he would be sitting across from his son, having the conversation he should have had 22 years ago. The coastal diner sat just 2 blocks from the beach. It was the kind of place locals favored: good food, reasonable prices, and no pretense. Graham arrived early and asked for a booth near the back where they could talk privately. The smell of salt air and fried fish filled the space. Through the windows he could see waves crashing against the shore. A waitress brought him water and left 3 menus on the table. At exactly 12:28, Graham saw them walking up to the entrance. Naomi had changed from her dress into jeans and a simple blouse. Eli wore khakis and a plain blue button-down shirt, his military bearing still evident in his perfect posture. Graham stood as they approached the table. "Thank you for coming," he said, genuine gratitude in his voice. They settled into the booth, Naomi and Eli on one side, Graham on the other. For a moment nobody spoke. "I want to apologize again," Graham finally said, looking first at Naomi, then at Eli. "My parents controlled everything back then. My phone, my mail. I should have fought harder to stay in touch with you, Naomi. I was young and afraid of losing their support, but that's no excuse." Naomi's expression softened slightly. "We were both teenagers. Neither of us knew how to handle what happened." "What was it like?" Graham asked quietly. "These past 22 years. Naomi sipped her water before answering. "Hard at first. I worked double shifts at a diner while my aunt helped with Eli. Got my GED, then community college classes at night. Met a good man named Deshawn when Eli was 5. We married when Eli was 7. Deshawn raised me," Eli added. "He was my dad in all the ways that count." Graham nodded, accepting the gentle correction. "Is he here for your graduation?" A shadow crossed both their faces. "He died when I was 15, Eli said. "Cancer." "I'm so sorry," Graham said, and meant it. After Deshawn passed, Naomi continued, "I went back to working extra shifts. Eli got a part-time job too, even though I told him to focus on school. Mom's stubborn," Eli said with the hint of a smile. "I get that from her." The waitress came to take their orders. Hamburgers for Eli and Graham, a salad for Naomi. When she left, Eli leaned forward slightly. "Let's be clear about something. I don't need a father figure. I had one. I don't need money. What I do need is to know if you're going to be around or if this is just curiosity for you." "Presence over money," Graham said with a nod. "I understand. I'd like to be in your life if you'll let me. No PR, no spectacle, just getting to know each other." "Good," Eli said. "Because I won't be part of some feel-good story about a millionaire finding his long-lost SEAL son. My team doesn't need that distraction, and neither do I." "Agreed," Graham said. "This stays between us." They ate their lunch, the conversation gradually becoming less tense. Eli talked about his training, careful not to include classified details. Naomi shared stories about his childhood accomplishments, his baseball trophies, his high school graduation as valedictorian. As they ordered pie for dessert, the silence between stories no longer felt uncomfortable. It felt like a beginning. Eli checked his watch. "I should head back soon. The team's having a barbecue later." Graham nodded, trying not to show his disappointment that their time was ending. "Of course. You should celebrate with your teammates." As the waitress brought the check, Graham reached for it but didn't make a big show of paying. It was a small gesture, but he saw Naomi notice and appreciate his restraint. Graham stood on the sidewalk outside the diner, watching as Naomi checked something on her phone. The afternoon sun felt warm on his face, and a gentle breeze carried the smell of salt water from the nearby ocean. "There's a clinic that can do a DNA test tomorrow morning," Naomi said, looking up from her screen. "They promise complete privacy and quick results." "That works for me," Graham replied. "I can handle the arrangements if you'd like." Naomi nodded. "As long as it stays private." "No press." "No press," Graham agreed. "Just the 3 of us." Eli, who had been quiet for the past few minutes, cleared his throat. "I'm having a thing later today," he said. "Just a small barbecue with some guys from my team. Around 4 o'clock. He hesitated, then added, "You could stop by if you want. As a guest, low-key." Graham felt a surge of emotion he didn't expect. It was just a casual invitation, but it meant something. "I'd like that," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Text me the address?" "Will do," Eli said with a nod. They stood in awkward silence for a moment before Naomi spoke. "I need to run a quick errand before the barbecue." "Eli, do you need a ride back to base housing?" "Yeah, that'd be good," Eli replied. He turned to Graham. "See you at 4 then?" "I'll be there," Graham promised. He watched as they walked to Naomi's rental car, a sensible mid-sized sedan. Once they drove away, Graham headed in the opposite direction toward the Coronado Pier. He needed to walk, to think, to process the whirlwind of emotions swirling inside him. He had a son, a grown man now with a life and career of his own, 22 years lost that could never be recovered. And Naomi, seeing her again after all this time, had awakened feelings he thought were long buried. The wooden planks of the pier creaked under his feet as he walked, hands shoved deep in his pockets. Fishing boats bobbed in the harbor. A pelican swooped low over the water. "What now?" he whispered to himself as he gazed out at the endless blue of the Pacific. The rental house where Eli's team gathered was modest, a small backyard with a charcoal grill, plastic tables covered with red-checked tablecloths, and a cooler full of sodas and beer. Nothing fancy, just young men celebrating their achievement together. Graham arrived at 3:55 carrying a couple of grocery bags filled with simple snacks, chips, salsa, and cookies. Nothing flashy that might make him seem like he was showing off. Eli spotted him at the gate and came over. "You found it okay," he said, taking one of the bags. "GPS makes everything easy these days," Graham replied with a small smile. "Come meet the guys," Eli said, leading the way into the yard, where 6 or 7 young men in casual clothes stood around the grill. Eli made quick introductions, keeping it simple. "This is Graham. He's a friend of the family." The SEALs nodded politely and one handed Graham a soda. They didn't ask questions, and Graham was grateful for that. These men had learned discretion as part of their training. Graham stayed in the background, letting the teammates lead the conversation. He noticed how they respected Eli, how they seemed to look to him when making decisions about the grill or when to start the next game of horseshoes. After about an hour, when Graham was helping refill the chip bowls, one of Eli's teammates, Martinez, he thought the name was sidled up next to him. "So," Martinez said quietly, "rich dad reveal, huh?" Graham froze, uncertain how to respond, but before he could say anything, Eli appeared at his side. "He's here for me today," Eli said, his voice gentle but firm. "That's what matters." Martinez nodded, raising his soda can in a small salute before walking away. "Thanks," Graham said softly. Eli shrugged. "Just the truth." They stood side by side, watching the others set up a beanbag toss game. "What was your favorite thing to do as a kid?" Graham asked, realizing how little he knew about his son's life. Eli thought for a moment. "Fishing. Deshaun used to take me down to the pier every other Saturday. We'd get up before dawn, pack sandwiches, and spend the whole morning out there." A smile played at the corners of his mouth. "I caught my first striped bass when I was 9. Fought it for 20 minutes before I got it in." Graham listened, soaking in every detail, trying to picture a young Eli proudly holding up his catch. "Deshaun sounds like he was a great father," Graham said. "He was," Eli replied simply. The afternoon stretched into early evening. Graham met Eli's friends, shared a few stories of his own when asked, but mostly he listened and observed. He wanted to understand this world his son had created for himself. As the barbecue wound down around 6, Eli walked Graham to the front gate. "Clinic at 9 tomorrow, off base," Eli said. Graham nodded. "I'll be there." They stood for a moment, neither quite sure how to say goodbye. "Thank you for inviting me today," Graham said finally. "Thanks for coming," Eli replied. Then, with the hint of a smile, "And for not showing up in a Ferrari," Graham laughed. "I left it at the hotel." It wasn't much, but as he walked back to his car, Graham felt the awkwardness between them had eased, if only a little. After a full night's rest, they met early to avoid crowds. The small coffee shop near the clinic was just opening when Graham arrived at 8:05. He ordered 3 coffees, black for himself, and 2 empty cups so Naomi and Eli could fix theirs how they liked. He texted Naomi the night before to ask her preference. "Cream, 2 sugars," she'd replied, and then a moment later, "Eli takes his with just cream, no sugar." It was a small thing, but Graham stored the information like treasure. He'd just finished adding cream to Eli's cup when they walked in. Both dressed casually in jeans and light jackets against the morning chill. "Morning," Graham said, sliding their coffees toward them. I hope I got them right. Naomi took a sip and nodded. Perfect. They sat at a corner table going over the consent forms Graham had downloaded and printed the night before. The clinic guarantees complete privacy, Graham explained. No media, no press releases. Just us. Good, Eli said. How long for results? They said tomorrow by early afternoon, Graham replied. They'll send them to a private portal we can access online. They finished their coffees in comfortable silence. The world outside was just waking up. A few joggers passed by the window, and a street cleaner rumbled down the road. Ready? Naomi asked, checking her watch. Graham gathered the empty cups. Let's do this. Together? They walked the short block to the clinic, Eli in the middle, Naomi and Graham on either side. The clinic was small and discreet, with a simple waiting room and professional staff who didn't ask unnecessary questions. The intake desk was staffed by a middle-aged woman with kind eyes who handed them clipboards with forms to fill out. Just basic information, she explained. Medical history, contact details. They sat side by side, pens scratching on paper. Graham noticed Eli pausing over the family medical history section and felt a pang of guilt. There were so many basic things his son didn't know about him. My mother had rheumatoid arthritis, Graham said quietly, and my father's side has a history of high blood pressure. Otherwise, we've been pretty healthy. Eli nodded and filled in the blanks. A technician called them back a few minutes later. The procedure was simple, just cheek swabs for both Eli and Graham. It was over in minutes. Results will be available tomorrow by 2 p.m., the technician explained as he labeled their samples. You'll get an email with a link to a secure portal where you can view them privately. No third parties? Naomi asked. None, the technician assured her. This is confidential medical information. We don't share it with anyone. As they prepared to leave, Graham stopped in the doorway. Whatever the lab says, I'm here, he said, looking from Naomi to Eli. The test is just making it official. Naomi's face softened. Thank you for saying that. Outside, the ocean breeze had picked up, carrying the scent of salt and seaweed. The sun had broken through the morning clouds, casting long shadows on the sidewalk. Are you both free later? Naomi asked. Maybe brunch at my place around 10:30? I'd like that, Graham said. Eli nodded. Sounds good. They went their separate ways, agreeing to meet at Naomi's rented condo. As Graham walked back to his hotel, he felt lighter somehow. Like taking the test had been the first real step toward building something new. Naomi's one-bedroom rental condo was small but immaculate. Sunlight streamed through gauzy curtains, illuminating a living room furnished with rental basics, but made homey with colorful throw pillows and a vase of fresh flowers. It's not much, Naomi said as she let them in, but it works for a short stay. It's nice, Graham said sincerely. The kitchen was separated from the living room by a breakfast bar where Naomi had set out plates and silverware. The smell of brewing coffee filled the air. Can I help with anything? Graham asked. You can scramble the eggs while I finish the toast, Naomi suggested, handing him a bowl and whisk. They worked side by side in the small kitchen, moving around each other with surprising ease. Eli set the table, and soon they were sitting down to a simple meal of scrambled eggs, toast, and fresh fruit. This is great, Graham said after his first bite. I usually just grab something on the go. Mom's big on actual sit-down meals, Eli said with a grin. Even in a temporary place. Food tastes better when you're not rushing, Naomi replied, passing the fruit bowl to Graham. After they'd eaten, Naomi disappeared into the bedroom and returned with a shoebox. I thought you might want to see these, she said, placing it on the coffee table. Graham looked at her questioningly. Photos, she explained. Of Eli growing up. Graham's throat tightened with emotion. I'd love to see them. They moved to the couch, Naomi in the middle, the box on her lap. One by one she pulled out photographs. Eli as a chubby-cheeked baby. Eli in Little League uniform, bat slung over his shoulder. Eli and Deshawn at a fishing pier, holding up their catches with identical grins. That was the striped bass I told you about, Eli said, pointing to the fish in the picture. Graham studied each photo hungrily, trying to absorb all the years he'd missed. There was Eli at his high school graduation, taller than Naomi by then, his face serious but proud. Eli in his first Navy uniform, standing straighter than seemed humanly possible. You kept such good records, Graham said. his voice thick with emotion. I wanted him to have his history, Naomi replied simply. Graham reached into his back pocket and pulled out his wallet. From behind his driver's license, he carefully extracted a worn photograph. Its edges soft from years of handling. "This is all I had," he said, holding it out. It was a photo of him and Naomi at their high school homecoming dance. They were 17, dressed in formal wear and standing under a balloon arch. Naomi's hair was done up in an elaborate style popular in the early 2000s, and Graham wore a rented tux with a blue bow tie that matched her dress. "You kept this?" Naomi asked, taking the photo carefully. "All these years," Graham admitted. "Even when I was married to Rebecca, I couldn't bring myself to throw it away. It was the last happy memory before everything fell apart." Eli leaned over to look at the picture. "Mom, your hair!" he said with a laugh. "It was the style then." Naomi protested, but she was smiling too. The laughter broke the tension, and for a moment, they were just three people sharing memories. The weight of their complicated past temporarily lifted. Eli's phone buzzed, breaking the moment. He checked it quickly. "Some of the guys are meeting at the beach at 1. Just hanging out before we all go our separate ways next week." "You should go," Naomi said. Eli hesitated, glancing at Graham. "You guys could come too if you want. Just walk nearby. No pressure." Graham felt warmth spread through his chest at the invitation. "I'd like that." The public beach was crowded with weekend visitors, families with children building sandcastles, teenagers playing volleyball, older couples walking along the water's edge. Eli's teammates had claimed a spot near the lifeguard tower, a cluster of young men throwing a football and laughing in the sunshine. Graham, Naomi, and Eli walked along the edge of the water, far enough away from the team to give Eli space, but close enough that he could join them when he wanted to. "So what are your plans after graduation?" Graham asked as they strolled, their shoes in their hands, feet sinking into the wet sand. "Serve with my unit for now," Eli replied. "Maybe finish my degree later, but I'm in no rush." "What were you studying before you joined up?" Graham asked. "Engineering," Eli said. "I like the problem-solving aspects of it." Graham nodded, storing away this new piece of information about his son. "That makes sense. You seem like someone who thinks things through carefully." "Gets that from me," Naomi said with a smile. "Sean used to say we both overthought everything." They walked in comfortable silence for a while, the waves washing over their feet. "When the time comes for school," Graham said carefully, "I'd be happy to help with tuition. No strings attached." Eli gave him a sideways look. "You don't have to do that." "I know," Graham replied, "but I'd like to. It's not about buying your affection. It's just one way I can be helpful." Eli seemed to consider this. "I'll think about it." "That's all I ask," Graham said. They continued walking, passing a young couple building an elaborate sand fortress. The woman laughed as the man tried to fashion a tower, only to have it collapse in a heap of wet sand. "What about you, Naomi?" Graham asked. "What have you been doing all these years besides raising an amazing son?" Naomi smiled at the compliment. "I work in healthcare administration now. Started as a receptionist and worked my way up. It's not glamorous, but I like helping people navigate the system." "Sounds important," Graham said sincerely. "Mum's being modest," Eli added. "She's the assistant director of patient services for a major hospital network. People are always calling her to fix impossible problems." "That doesn't surprise me at all," Graham said, glancing at Naomi with admiration. "You always did know how to get things done." A light blush colored Naomi's cheeks. "It's just experience." They walked until they reached a rocky outcropping at the far end of the beach, then turned back. Eli's phone buzzed again. "The guys are heading to the taco stand for lunch," he said. "I should join them." "Of course," Graham said. "Thanks for including us in your walk." Eli hesitated, then said, "There's a good taco place near Mom's condo. Maybe dinner there tonight, around 5:30. "I'd like that," Graham said, and Naomi nodded her agreement. They watched as Eli jogged across the sand to join his friends. One of them clapped him on the shoulder, and they all headed toward the boardwalk. "You raised an incredible young man," Graham said quietly. "He is pretty amazing, isn't he?" Naomi replied, pride evident in her voice. Together, they walked back along the shore, the waves washing away their footprints behind them. The taco stand was little more than a window with a counter and a few wooden benches for seating. But the smell of grilled meat and fresh tortillas made Graham's mouth water as they approached. They ordered at the window, carne asada for Graham, fish tacos for Naomi, and a combination plate for Eli. The young woman working the counter handed them plastic baskets lined with wax paper. Loaded with food, they found a bench facing the sunset, where they could watch the sky turn from blue to shades of pink and orange as they ate. "These are incredible," Graham said after his first bite. "Told you," Eli replied with a small smile. "Best tacos in Coronado." They ate in comfortable silence for a while, enjoying the food and the view. As they finished, Eli seemed to be considering something, his expression thoughtful. "I need to say something," he finally said, setting down his napkin. "I don't want to be a headline." Graham nodded, understanding immediately. "You won't be." "I promise. It's just," Eli continued, "I've worked hard to get where I am. The guys respect me for what I can do, not who my father might be." "I get it," Graham said. "No press, no announcements. This is private, between us." "It's not that I'm ashamed or anything," Eli clarified. "I just don't want this to be about anything except us getting to know each other." "That's exactly how it should be," Graham agreed. Naomi, who had been listening quietly, spoke up. "Let's define our own pace. No pressure, no expectations, just one day at a time." Graham looked at her gratefully. "One day at a time sounds perfect." As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the pavement, they made plans to meet for breakfast the next morning at 8. A way to pass the time until the DNA results would be available at 2. "Same diner as before?" Graham suggested. "Sounds good," Eli agreed. They walked together to the parking lot, the evening air growing cooler around them. "Thank you for today," Graham said as they prepared to separate. It meant a lot. Naomi and Eli got into her car while Graham headed down the street toward his hotel. When he reached the corner, he paused and turned back, watching as their taillights disappeared around a bend. He pulled out his phone and sent a simple text to both of them. "Thank you for today. Looking forward to tomorrow." The night passed quietly, and the next morning they kept their breakfast plan. The small diner was already busy when Graham arrived, but he managed to snag a booth by the window. Sunlight streamed in, creating patterns on the worn tabletop. Naomi and Eli arrived a few minutes later, both looking rested and calm. Graham wondered if he looked as nervous as he felt. In just a few hours, they would have official confirmation of what they all already believed to be true. "Sleep okay?" Naomi asked as she slid into the booth. "Pretty well," Graham replied. "You?" "Like a rock," Eli said. "Navy training teaches you to sleep whenever you can." They ordered breakfast, pancakes for Eli, egg whites and toast for Naomi, and coffee for all three. "I've been thinking," Graham said as they waited for their food, "about how to stay connected after I go back to Seattle." "What did you have in mind?" Naomi asked. "Nothing complicated," Graham assured them. "Maybe a monthly breakfast when Eli's in town? Letters during deployments instead of expensive gifts?" Eli nodded slowly. "That could work. But you should know deployment windows can change quickly. Sometimes we get called up with almost no notice." "Then I'll adapt," Graham said simply. "That's what families do, right?" The word families hung in the air between them. It was a big word, loaded with meaning and expectation, but neither Naomi nor Eli objected to it. "Right," Eli agreed after a moment. Their food arrived, steaming and fragrant. As they ate, they talked about small everyday things, favorite movies, books they'd enjoyed, places they'd traveled. It was the kind of ordinary conversation families had over breakfast tables all across the country, and its very normalcy felt precious to Graham. "Should we meet at your place at 1:30? Graham asked Naomi as they finished eating. "To wait for the results together?" Naomi nodded. "That works. I'll make some fresh coffee." They parted outside the diner, each with errands to run before meeting again. Graham watched them drive away, then headed to a nearby bookstore. He wanted to find something for Eli, not flashy or expensive, but meaningful. Something that said, "I'm thinking about you." As he browsed the shelves, his phone buzzed with a text from Naomi. He likes sci-fi, especially the classics. Graham smiled at her thoughtfulness and headed for the science fiction section. At 1:30 that afternoon, Graham knocked on Naomi's door, a small paper bag from the bookstore tucked under his arm. She opened it wearing jeans and a simple blue top, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. "Come in," she said, stepping aside. "Eli's already here." The living room blinds were half drawn against the afternoon sun, casting the room in a soft golden light. Eli sat on the couch, his phone in his hand, looking up when Graham entered. "Hey," he said with a nod. "Hey," Graham replied, suddenly shy. He held out the paper bag. "I got you something." "It's nothing fancy, just—" Eli took the bag and peered inside. He pulled out a hardcover copy of Dune by Frank Herbert. "Mom mentioned you like sci-fi," Graham explained. "This was one of my favorites when I was about your age." Eli ran his fingers over the cover. "Thanks. I've actually never read this one." "The movie doesn't do it justice," Graham said with a smile. "Coffee?" Naomi offered from the kitchen. "Please," Graham replied. To pass the time until 2 o'clock, they sorted through the photo duplicates Naomi had made. She handed Graham a small stack, copies of Eli's school pictures, sports team photos, graduation. "I thought you might want these," she said softly. "For your place in Seattle." Graham's throat tightened with emotion. "Thank you," he managed to say. "I'd like to put some in my office." "You never said what you do," Eli remarked. "Helping to organize the photos into chronological order." "I started a software company about 10 years ago," Graham explained. "Security systems for hospitals and clinics, mostly." "Is that why you're a donor to veteran causes?" Eli asked. "Because of the hospital connection?" Graham hesitated, then decided on complete honesty. "Partly, but also because my father was a veteran. He wasn't a good dad, but I respected his service." Naomi looked up, surprise evident on her face. "You never told me that." "He didn't talk about it much when I was growing up," Graham said. "Desert Storm," he came back. "Different," my mom said. "That explains some things," Naomi said quietly. Before Graham could ask what she meant, Eli glanced at his phone. "It's 1:58. The atmosphere in the room suddenly grew tense. Eli refreshed the portal page on his phone, his expression focused. Naomi moved to stand behind him, one hand squeezing his shoulder gently. Graham sat forward on the edge of the couch, his heart pounding. No one spoke as the clock on the wall ticked toward 2 o'clock. At exactly 2 o'clock, Eli refreshed the page one more time. The results loaded clear and unambiguous, positive paternal match. There was no surprise, no dramatic reaction. They had all known the truth already. Still, seeing it officially confirmed brought a wave of emotion that none of them had quite expected. Eli exhaled slowly, his eyes wet but steady. Graham nodded once, feeling tears prick at his own eyes. Naomi covered her face briefly with one hand, then took a deep breath and let it out. "Well," Eli said finally, "that's that." "Yes," Graham agreed, his voice thick. "That's that." Naomi squeezed Eli's shoulder again, then moved to sit beside him on the couch. "I meant what I said yesterday," Graham said after a moment. "I'm here regardless, but now I can sign whatever paperwork needs signing. Only with your consent, of course. No announcements," Eli reminded him. "Just show up. That's what matters." Graham nodded, understanding exactly what his son meant. It wasn't about legal recognition or financial support. It was about being present, consistent, reliable. "Should we celebrate somehow?" Naomi asked. "Nothing big, just mark the moment. Maybe a walk on the pier later?" Graham suggested. "Around 5? The light is beautiful then," Eli nodded. "I'd like that." They spent the next half hour going through the detailed results together. Besides confirming paternity, the test had revealed other genetic information. Shared traits, health markers, ancestry details. "Looks like you got your mom's intelligence and my stubbornness," Graham joked, trying to lighten the mood. "And your height," Naomi added. "He shot up 6 inches his sophomore year of high school. Outgrew all my clothes in 3 months," Eli recalled with a small smile. By 2:40, they had gone through all the information the test provided. Graham stood, sensing that Naomi and Eli might need some time alone to process. "I'll head out for a bit," he said. "Let you two have some space. Text me the exact spot to meet at the pier." Naomi nodded. "We'll see you at 5. As Graham left the condo, he felt lighter somehow, as if a weight he'd carried for 22 years, without knowing it had finally been lifted. The test had confirmed what his heart already knew from the first moment he saw Eli standing tall in his Navy uniform. He had a son, and somehow, against all odds, he was being given a second chance to be part of his life. The Coronado Pier stretched out over the water like a long wooden finger pointing toward the horizon. At exactly 5 o'clock, Graham stood at the entrance, watching seagulls circle overhead and fishermen cast their lines into the sparkling water below. The late afternoon sun bathed everything in a warm golden light, making even the weathered planks beneath his feet look magical. This was Graham's favorite time of day, when shadows grew long and the harsh light of noon softened into something gentler. He spotted Naomi and Eli walking toward him, their figures backlit by the sun. Something about seeing them approach together made his heart swell in his chest. His family. The word still felt strange in his mind, but right in his heart. "Beautiful evening," Naomi said as they reached him. "Perfect," Graham agreed. They began walking along the pier, stopping occasionally to look out at the water or watch the boats passing by. The air smelled of salt and sunscreen, with hints of fried food from the small concession stand at the pier's entrance. "Tell me about your worst haircut," Graham said to Eli, trying to build bridges through small talk. Eli groaned. "7th grade. I tried to cut it myself the night before school pictures. It was a disaster," Naomi added with a laugh. "I came home from night class to find clumps of hair all over the bathroom, and this child looking like he'd been attacked by rabid squirrels. Mom made me wear a baseball cap for 2 weeks until it grew enough to fix," Eli said, smiling at the memory. "What about you?" Naomi asked Graham. "Any hair disasters?" "College," Graham admitted. "I went through a phase where I thought bleached tips were cool. I looked ridiculous, but nobody had the heart to tell me." They all laughed, the sound carried away by the ocean breeze. They continued sharing small stories as they walked. Naomi's struggles with night school while working full-time, Eli's first camping trip with his Boy Scout troop, Graham's earliest business failure before he found success. "My first startup crashed and burned," Graham admitted. "I was trying too hard to impress investors instead of focusing on making something useful." "What changed?" Eli asked. "I stopped trying to be what I thought other people wanted," Graham said. "Started building things that actually solved problems." They had reached the end of the pier and turned to walk back, the setting sun now directly in front of them, turning the water to liquid gold. Graham's phone rang, interrupting the moment. He checked the screen and frowned slightly. "Sorry, I should take this," he said, stepping a few feet away before answering. "Graham Whitaker," he said crisply. Naomi and Eli couldn't hear the other end of the conversation, but they watched as Graham's expression changed from professional to surprised. "Tomorrow night," he was saying, "in Los Angeles? I'm afraid that won't work for me. Yes, I understand it's a prestigious award, but I have prior commitments. So I won't be changing my plans." He ended the call and rejoined them, slipping his phone back into his pocket. "Everything okay?" Naomi asked. "Fine," Graham said. "Just work. They wanted me at some fancy award dinner tomorrow night in L.A. "Sounds important," Eli remarked. Graham shrugged. "Not as important as our breakfast plans." The simple statement hung in the air between them. Graham had just declined what was clearly a significant professional event to keep his promise of breakfast with them. It wasn't said with any expectation of praise or gratitude, just a statement of priorities. Eli met Graham's eyes, and something passed between them, a quiet acknowledgement, perhaps even a tiny seed of trust beginning to grow. "Speaking of breakfast," Naomi said, "same place tomorrow?" 8 o'clock? "I'll be there," Graham promised. The sun was sinking lower now, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. They stood side by side at the railing, watching the day end together. "This was a good day," Eli said quietly. Graham nodded, too full of emotion to speak. "A good day indeed, perhaps one of the most important days of his life." The following morning, Graham arrived at the diner at 7:58 a.m., sliding into what had become their booth by the window. The waitress recognized him now and brought coffee without being asked. "The usual group this morning?" she asked with a smile. "Yes," Graham replied, pleased that they had been here enough times to have a usual. Naomi and Eli arrived right on time, sliding into the booth across from him. "Morning," Eli said, reaching for the coffee pot to fill their cups. "Sleep well?" Graham asked. "Like a rock," Eli replied. "You?" "Better than I have in years," Graham admitted. They ordered quickly, the same breakfast choices as before, creatures of habit, all three of them. "I've been thinking," Graham said once the waitress had left, "about concrete ways I can be part of your life." "Eli, not just words, but actions." Eli nodded, encouraging him to continue. "First, I know you mentioned needing a reliable vehicle when you're on leave. I'd like to help with that. Nothing flashy, just a solid used truck that won't break down on you." "That would be helpful," Eli acknowledged. My old beater finally died last month. Second, I'd like to be on call for practical needs when you're home. A ride from the airport. Help moving furniture, whatever comes up. Okay, Eli said with a small nod. And third, I'd like to write letters when you're deployed. Real paper letters, not just emails. My dad was military, and he always said physical mail meant a lot when he was overseas. Eli's expression softened. That would be good, thanks. The waitress brought their food, and they ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes before Naomi spoke up. I was thinking too, she said, about family traditions. What if we did alternating family breakfasts whenever schedules allow? No pressure, just a standing invitation. I'd like that, Graham said immediately. Me too, Eli agreed. Graham noticed how careful they all were being, making plans but leaving room for adjustment. Suggesting rather than demanding, offering connection without pressure. It felt like building a house one brick at a time, making sure each piece was solid before adding the next. As they were finishing their meal, Eli's phone buzzed with a message. His expression grew serious as he read it. Everything okay? Naomi asked, maternal concern in her voice. Preliminary deployment window, Eli said, looking up from his phone. 3 to 6 weeks from now. The news fell between them like a stone, making the reality of Eli's job suddenly very concrete. Soon he would be gone, somewhere they couldn't follow, doing things they wouldn't know about, facing dangers they couldn't protect him from. That's soon, Graham said, trying to keep his voice steady. Standard timeline, Eli replied with a small shrug. Could change, but that's the current word. Naomi reached across the table and squeezed her son's hand. Her face showed a mixture of pride and worry, an expression Graham imagined she had worn many times since Eli joined the Navy. We should make the most of the time before then, Graham said. Eli nodded. Absolutely. As they paid the bill and walked outside into the morning sunshine, Graham felt a new urgency. The clock was ticking now. 3 to 6 weeks to build a foundation strong enough to withstand months of separation. Park bench across the street is nice and quiet, Naomi suggested. Maybe we could sit and talk a bit more? Graham checked his watch. I have a conference call at noon, but I'm free until then. Let's do it, Eli agreed. The park bench sat under a spreading oak tree, offering shade from the morning sun. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves overhead, and somewhere nearby a lawn sprinkler ticked rhythmically back and forth. They sat side by side, Naomi in the middle, Eli and Graham on either end. A mother pushed a stroller along the path in front of them, and an older man walked past with a small dog on a leash. We should talk about communication rules, Eli said after they'd settled. Military life has some restrictions we need to work around. Tell me what you need, Graham said simply. First, no surprise visits to base, Eli explained. Always text or call first. Sometimes I'll be able to meet, sometimes not. Understood, Graham nodded. Second, when I'm deployed, I might go dark for weeks at a time. No contact, no emails, nothing. It doesn't mean something's wrong, it's just the nature of the job. That will be hard, Graham admitted, but I understand. Third, I can't always tell you where I am or what I'm doing. OPSEC, operational security, means some things stay classified. We've dealt with that for years, Naomi added. You learn to read between the lines. Graham nodded again, taking mental notes. Anything else? Eli hesitated, then said, This is important to me. I need you to stay out of headlines, especially anything connecting us. My team doesn't need that kind of attention. I've already declined 3 interview requests, Graham said. One reporter even used the phrase secret son in their email. What did you say? Eli asked, tension evident in his voice. Nothing, Graham replied firmly. Deleted the email. Blocked the sender. Eli's shoulders relaxed visibly. Thank you. Your privacy isn't negotiable, Graham assured him. I won't use our relationship for publicity or image building, ever. Naomi, who had been listening quietly, reached out and squeezed Graham's arm gently. Thank you for choosing discretion over image. That means a lot to both of us. The simple touch of her hand on his arm sent a small current of warmth through Graham. He was suddenly acutely aware of how close she sat, of the familiar scent of her perfume, something floral with hints of vanilla, the same scent she'd worn in high school. So, Eli said, seemingly unaware of the moment between his parents, you mentioned wanting to write letters during deployment? Graham pulled his attention back to the conversation. Yes, if that works for you. It does. Mum can forward them to my APO address once I'm settled. I'd be happy to, Naomi agreed. They talked logistics for a while longer, how to handle holidays, what kind of communication worked best, when to expect brief windows of contact during deployment. By noon, they had a framework that felt solid but flexible. "I should head back for that call," Graham said, checking his watch reluctantly. "And I promised to help Martinez move some furniture this afternoon," Eli added. "Dinner tonight?" Naomi suggested. "I could cook something simple at my place. Around 6:30? "I'm in," Eli said immediately. "I'd love that," Graham agreed. "Can I bring anything?" "Just yourself," Naomi replied with a smile. "I was thinking spaghetti and salad." "Nothing fancy." "Sounds perfect," Graham said. As they walked back toward town together, Graham felt a sense of peace he hadn't experienced in years. They were figuring this out, one step at a time. The smell of garlic and tomato sauce filled Naomi's small rental kitchen. Steam rose from a pot of boiling water on the stove, and Naomi stirred a simmering sauce with a wooden spoon. Graham stood at the counter, chopping vegetables for the salad. Eli was arranging garlic bread on a baking sheet, ready for the oven. "I forgot how much I like cooking with people," Graham said as he sliced cucumbers into thin rounds. "I usually just eat takeout when I'm alone. Mum always said a kitchen needs at least 2 people to feel right," Eli remarked. "My grandmother taught me that," Naomi confirmed. "She said food tastes better when it's made with company." They worked together easily, moving around each other in the small space, passing utensils and ingredients with the coordination of people who genuinely enjoyed each other's company. "Music," Naomi suggested, pulling out her phone. "What are we in the mood for?" "Anything but country," Eli said with a grin. "Jazz?" Graham suggested. Naomi tapped her screen and soft jazz filled the room, adding to the cozy atmosphere. "So what movies do you both like?" Graham asked as he tossed the salad with dressing. "Mom's a sucker for romantic comedies," Eli teased. "Hey," Naomi protested, flicking a dish towel in his direction. "I like action movies too." "She covered her eyes through half of the last one we watched," Eli stage whispered to Graham. "Only during the really violent parts," Naomi defended herself. "What about you?" Eli asked Graham. "What do you watch?" "Science fiction mostly," Graham admitted. "The nerdier the better. See?" Eli said to his mother. "I told you I got that from somewhere." They laughed together, and Graham felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the hot stove. This easy banter, this feeling of belonging, it was everything he'd missed for 22 years without knowing it. As Naomi drained the pasta at the sink, Graham found himself watching her, the confident way she moved, the small smile that played at the corners of her mouth as she listened to their conversation. She had raised an amazing son on her own, built a successful career, and somehow managed not to become bitter about the past. Her strength amazed him. They sat down to eat, passing dishes family-style around the small table. The food was simple but delicious, spaghetti with rich tomato sauce, crisp salad, and garlic bread still warm from the oven. "This is great," Graham said after his first bite. "I can't remember the last home-cooked meal I had that wasn't made by my housekeeper." "Do you cook at all?" Naomi asked. "Scrambled eggs and toast is about my limit," Graham admitted. "Though I make excellent reservations," Eli laughed, twirling spaghetti around his fork. "Deshaun taught me to cook. He said no son of his was going to college without knowing how to make at least 5 decent meals. He was a wise man," Naomi said softly. A comfortable silence fell over the table as they ate. Through the open window they could hear the distant sound of waves breaking against the shore. "I have regrets," Graham said suddenly, setting down his fork. "I should have fought harder at 17. I should have questioned what my parents told me. I should have tried to find you." Naomi looked at him, her dark eyes gentle. "We were kids, Graham. Kids with no money, no power, no real understanding of the world. What matters is now." "She's right," Eli added. "You can't change the past, but you're here now trying. That counts for something." Graham felt a lump in his throat. "Thank you," he managed to say. After dinner, Eli insisted on helping with cleanup. Graham washed while Eli dried, and Naomi put things away. The simple domestic task felt almost sacred in its ordinariness. "I have something for you," Naomi said when they'd finished. She disappeared into the bedroom and returned with a photo album. "These are the duplicate prints we talked about. To a starter album." Graham took the album reverently, opening it to find carefully arranged photographs. Eli as a baby, as a toddler, as a growing boy. each labeled with dates and brief descriptions in Naomi's neat handwriting. "This is," he began, but couldn't finish, too overcome with emotion. "Just the beginning," Naomi said softly. "We'll keep adding to it." Eli, watching from the doorway, nodded his agreement. "Photos, letters, memories. We'll build it together." Graham closed the album carefully and held it against his chest. "Thank you. Both of you." Outside, the last light of day faded from the sky, and stars began to appear, one by one at first, then in clusters and constellations. "It's getting late," Eli said, checking his watch. "I should head back. Early training tomorrow." They walked him to the door, and Eli hugged his mother before turning to Graham. For a moment they stood awkwardly, neither sure how to say goodbye. Then Eli extended his hand, and Graham took it, surprised when Eli pulled him into a brief but firm hug. "See you tomorrow," Eli said as he stepped back. "Breakfast again?" "Absolutely," Graham agreed, trying to hide how much the simple hug had meant to him. After Eli left, Graham and Naomi stood in comfortable silence in the small living room. The jazz music still played softly in the background. "I should go too," Graham said, though he was reluctant to leave. "Thank you for today," Naomi said, walking him to the door. "For everything." "Thank you for giving me a chance," Graham replied. "I know you didn't have to." They stood close in the doorway, and for a brief moment, Graham thought about how easy it would be to lean down and kiss her. The thought surprised him with its intensity. Instead, he stepped back, clutching the photo album. "Good night, Naomi." "Good night, Graham," she replied, her smile soft in the dim light. "See you in the morning." As he walked back to his hotel under a sky filled with stars, Graham felt something he hadn't felt in years, the quiet joy of knowing exactly where he belonged. The following morning, they kept momentum with a short check-in breakfast at an outdoor cafe. Sunlight dappled the table through overhead palm trees, and a light breeze carried the scent of coffee and fresh pastries. Graham arrived first and secured a table in a quiet corner. He ordered coffee for 3 and waited, watching people pass by on the sidewalk. Couples holding hands, parents pushing strollers, joggers with earbuds, ordinary people living ordinary lives, something he suddenly wanted very much. When Naomi and Eli arrived, Graham felt his heart lift. They had only been doing this for a few days, but already this morning gathering felt like a precious tradition. "I've been thinking," Eli said as he stirred cream into his coffee, "about staying connected when I'm in town." "What did you have in mind?" Graham asked. "A monthly tradition," Eli explained. "First Sunday of any month I'm home, peer breakfast at 8 a.m., rain or shine." Graham smiled. "I'd love that." "We could put it in our phones," Naomi suggested, pulling out her cell. Shared calendar entry. First Sunday every month, a family breakfast. The word family still gave Graham a warm feeling in his chest. He took out his own phone to add the entry. "I'll schedule around those," he promised. "First priority, not last." They ate pastries and talked about small things. The weather, the good coffee, a movie Eli wanted to see before he deployed. Normal family conversation, each word weaving stronger threads between them. As they were finishing their coffee, Graham's phone vibrated on the table. He glanced down at the notification, and his expression darkened. "What is it?" Naomi asked, noticing the change. Graham flipped his phone face down without answering. Nothing important, but Eli had caught a glimpse of the screen. "Billionaire's seal, son?" He quoted, his voice tight. Graham sighed. "Some gossip site fishing for a story. I've been getting messages like this since yesterday." "How did they find out?" Naomi asked, worry creasing her forehead. "Someone at the graduation probably recognized me, put 2 and 2 together when they saw us talking." Graham shrugged. "It happens, but I haven't responded to any of them." Eli's jaw tightened. "And you won't, right?" "I promised you privacy," Graham said firmly. "That's not negotiable." The tension in Eli's shoulders eased slightly. "Thank you. We knew this might happen," Naomi said pragmatically. "You're a public figure, Graham." "Maybe so," Graham replied, "but my family isn't for public consumption." The word family hung between them again, but this time with a protective force. Graham would shield them from unwanted attention no matter what. They continued eating, refusing to let the intrusion ruin their morning. A young couple with a toddler took the table next to them. The little girl, no more than 2, smiled shyly at Eli, who grinned and waved back. "You're good with kids," Graham observed. "He always has been," Naomi said proudly. Even as a teenager, he was the neighborhood babysitter all the parents wanted. Just patient. I guess, Eli said with a modest shrug. Graham filed away this new information about his son, adding it to the growing collection of things he was learning. Every detail felt precious. I should head out, Eli said, checking his watch. Meeting Martinez for a run at 10. They walked together to the corner where they would separate, Eli toward the base. Naomi to her condo, Graham back to his hotel. I'll text you both later about dinner, Naomi said. Graham watched them walk away, Naomi's hand resting briefly on Eli's shoulder as they spoke. Mother and son, so comfortable together, so attuned to each other. He hoped someday to have even a fraction of that easy connection with Eli. His phone buzzed again. Another media inquiry. Graham deleted it without reading and continued walking, the California sun warm on his shoulders. Graham sat in a quiet corner of his hotel lobby, his laptop open on the small table in front of him. He'd been on a video call with his assistant in Seattle for the past half hour, catching up on business matters that couldn't wait. One more thing, Sarah said from the screen. PR department says we've had 17 media requests since yesterday, all about the same thing, rumors about you having a son in the military. Graham's expression hardened. And what did you tell them? Nothing yet, Sarah replied. Policy is to run personal inquiries by you first. Good, Graham said. Tell PR to issue no comment on all of them. No confirmation, no denial, nothing. Sarah looked concerned. The narrative's already building online, Graham. Might be better to control the story rather than let speculation run wild. No statement, Graham repeated firmly. This is family, not a campaign. Understood, Sarah said, making a note. I'll let them know. After ending the call, Graham sat back and rubbed his eyes. He'd known this might happen. His company was well known in the tech world, and he'd been profiled in enough business magazines that his face was recognizable in certain circles. A PR associate from his company called next, making one last pitch for a simple statement to manage public perception. Graham declined again, his voice leaving no room for debate. He pulled out his phone and sent a text to Eli, press poking. I'm silent unless you want otherwise. The reply came quickly. Stay silent. Then his phone rang, an unfamiliar number with a New York area code. Graham answered cautiously. Graham Whitaker speaking. Mr. Whitaker, this is Joanna Lewis from the Daily Chronicle. We're running a feature on tech leaders with military connections, and we've heard you might have a personal story to share about a Navy SEAL. Graham cut her off. No comment. He ended the call and immediately blocked the number. Then he texted Naomi to warn her that reporters might try contacting her too. Already got 2 calls, she responded. Didn't answer. Thanks for the heads up. Graham stood and stretched, suddenly feeling confined in the hotel lobby. He needed fresh air, space to think. Grabbing his keycard, he headed for the exit, nodding politely to the front desk staff as he passed. Outside, the sunshine felt cleansing. He walked aimlessly at first, then found himself heading toward the water. The beach had become his thinking spot over the past few days. As he walked, he reflected on how his priorities had shifted so dramatically in such a short time. A week ago, he might have seen the media attention as an opportunity, perhaps even arranged a carefully staged interview that would boost his company's image. Now, the thought of using his relationship with Eli that way made his stomach turn. Some things were too precious, too private for public consumption. His newly discovered family was definitely one of them. His phone buzzed again in his pocket. Graham ignored it, focusing instead on the rhythm of his footsteps and the warmth of the sun on his face. The media would eventually lose interest when he refused to feed the story. What mattered was protecting Eli's privacy and honoring his wishes. Graham paused at a street vendor selling cold drinks and bought a bottle of water. As he stood sipping it, he spotted a father teaching his young son to ride a bike along the path that paralleled the beach. The boy wobbled, nearly fell, then found his balance, his face lighting up with pride as his father cheered him on. 22 years. Graham had missed so many moments like that with Eli. First steps, first words, first bike ride, but dwelling on what was lost wouldn't help them build something new. He tossed his empty water bottle into a recycling bin and turned back toward town, his resolve strengthened. He would continue to shield his family from unwanted attention, focus on the time they had before Eli deployed, and honor the second chance he'd been given. By the time he reached his hotel again at 12:25, he felt clearer, calmer, more certain of his path forward. The sunlight seemed brighter somehow, the colors more vivid, as if seeing his family had adjusted something in his vision, allowing him to truly see the world around him for the first time. The table in Naomi's condo was set for 3 once again. No fancy china or elaborate centerpieces, just simple white plates, everyday glasses, and a small vase of wildflowers Eli had picked up from a street vendor on his way over. They had decided against a restaurant tonight, preferring the privacy of home for their family dinner. Graham brought dessert, a berry pie from a local bakery Naomi had mentioned she liked. Eli contributed a bottle of sparkling cider. "Something smells amazing," Graham said as he entered the kitchen. "Mom's famous pot roast," Eli explained. "She only makes it for special occasions." Naomi, wearing an apron over her jeans and blouse, smiled as she checked something in the oven. It was Eli's favorite growing up. They settled into what had become their routine, Graham setting the table, Eli making a salad, Naomi orchestrating the main course. The easy rhythm of it felt like they'd been doing this for years rather than days. When everything was ready, they sat down together, the golden evening light streaming through the windows. Eli raised his glass of sparkling cider. "To family," he said simply. "To family," Graham and Naomi echoed, clinking glasses with him. As they ate, their conversation flowed naturally from topic to topic. Eli's first deployment, a project Graham was working on, Naomi's upcoming conference in Chicago. The shadow of Eli's departure hung over them, but they didn't let it dampen the warmth of being together. "I think we should set some concrete commitments," Graham said as they finished the main course. "Ways to stay connected, especially while you're deployed," Naomi nodded. "Good idea." "I've been thinking about that too," Eli added. "Maybe we could make a list?" Graham pulled a small notebook from his pocket. "I'll write them down." Together they crafted their family contract, monthly peer breakfast when possible, group text thread for everyday life, photos, updates, letters during deployments. Naomi will forward if needed. No social posts about their relationship ever. Simple, clear boundaries that felt right to all of them. "There's one more thing," Graham said, reaching for a small paper bag he'd brought with him. "This is for you, Eli." Eli took the bag, looking curious. Inside was a handsome leather journal, its cover soft and supple, with no logos or brands, just simple quality craftsmanship. "I thought it could be for letters," Graham explained. "Both ways. You write to me when you can, I'll write to you. Then when you come home, we'll have a record." Eli ran his fingers over the leather cover. "This is perfect." "Thank you. And I got something for all of us," Naomi said, pulling a small box from a drawer. Inside were 3 simple braided leather bracelets, each with a tiny silver anchor charm. "I know it's a bit cheesy, but I thought something to remind us of each other." She handed one to Eli, one to Graham, keeping the third for herself. Graham slipped his onto his wrist immediately, touched by the gesture. "Not cheesy at all," he assured her. "It's perfect." Eli put his on as well, the leather dark against his skin. "Now we're officially corny," he joked, but his eyes were soft. After dinner, Graham insisted on helping with dishes again. As they worked side by side in the small kitchen, he found himself watching Naomi, the graceful way she moved, the small smile that played at her lips as she hummed along to the music, playing softly in the background. "What?" she asked, catching him looking. "Nothing," he said quickly. "Just happy to be here." Her smile widened. "Me too." When the kitchen was clean, Eli suggested a short beach walk. The sunset should be amazing tonight. They strolled together along the shore, 3 silhouettes against the dusky sky. Waves lapped at the sand, erasing their footprints behind them. Ahead, the sun sank toward the horizon, painting the clouds in brilliant hues of pink and gold. "I feel like we should be having some deep, meaningful conversation," Graham joked. "Isn't that what people do on sunset beach walks?" Eli laughed. "I think we've hit our quota of deep talks for 1 week. Sometimes it's nice to just be together," Naomi added softly. Graham looked at her, then at Eli, his family, walking beside him as the day ended. "Yes," he agreed. "Sometimes that's enough." They walked until the sun disappeared completely, the sky darkening to purple, then deep blue. Stars appeared one by one, and a crescent moon hung low over the water. Early start tomorrow, Eli said as they turned back toward the lights of town. But maybe breakfast again. 6:30? We'll be there, Naomi promised, speaking for both herself and Graham. As they walked back to Naomi's condo, Graham's new bracelet caught the streetlight, the tiny anchor gleaming. Her small token, but it meant the world to him. A tangible symbol of belonging, of connection, of family. Dawn painted the sky in pale pinks and golds as they walked along the empty beach. It was 6:20 a.m., and they had the shore to themselves, just Graham, Naomi, and Eli, their footprints making parallel tracks in the wet sand. The air was cool and fresh, with that special clarity that comes only at daybreak. Seagulls wheeled overhead, their cries carrying on the light breeze. Waves washed gently against the shore, rhythmic and soothing. They had decided to meet for this early walk before breakfast, wanting to start the day together, watching the sun rise over the water. No one spoke at first. There was a companionable silence between them that needed no words to fill it. Eli walked at the water's edge, occasionally stopping to pick up a shell or interesting stone. Graham and Naomi strolled a few feet away from the tide line, close enough that their shoulders sometimes brushed. "I forgive them," Graham said suddenly, breaking the silence. "Who?" Naomi asked, glancing at him. "My parents," Graham clarified, "for keeping us apart, for lying, for stealing those years from all three of us." Naomi was quiet for a moment. "I forgave them years ago," she finally said. Holding on to anger was too heavy, especially while raising Eli. "When did you know?" Graham asked. "That they had lied about me wanting to break things off?" "When Eli was about 5, Naomi replied. "I ran into your cousin at a mall in Oakland. She told me how upset you'd been after the breakup, how you'd tried to find me when you came home from that summer program." Graham shook his head, remembering. "They told me you wanted nothing to do with me, that you'd moved on. We were both lied to," Naomi said softly. "But what matters now is that we found each other again. That Eli has both of us in his life." At the mention of his name, Eli looked back at them, a questioning expression on his face. They waved to show everything was fine, and he returned to his beachcombing. "He's amazing," Graham said, watching his son. "Io did an incredible job raising him." "I had help," Naomi reminded him. "Deshaun was a wonderful father to him." "I wish I could thank him," Graham said sincerely. "He would have liked you," Naomi replied. "Once he got past being suspicious of your money." Graham laughed softly. "Smart man." They walked in silence for a while longer. The sun continued its ascent, turning the water to shimmering gold. "I rotate out next week," Eli said as he rejoined them, pockets bulging with his beach finds. "Could we do one last breakfast before I go?" "Day after tomorrow?" "Of course," Graham said immediately. "I'll pencil it in." Eli smiled at the small joke. Their morning breakfast had become such a fixture that penciling in seemed absurd. "I'll be here," Graham added more seriously. "And when you're away, I'll write. We'll keep it simple and steady," Naomi said, reaching out to straighten the collar of Eli's jacket in a maternal gesture. They had reached the far end of the beach and stood at the water's edge, waves lapping at their shoes. The rising sun cast long shadows behind them, 3 figures standing together against the light. "Ready for breakfast?" Eli asked. "I'm starving." "Always," Graham replied with a smile. They turned and began walking back the way they had come, but Eli suddenly stopped. "Wait," he said, looking back at their footprints in the wet sand. "Look at that." They turned to see what he was pointing at. Their footprints stretched back along the beach, 3 sets of tracks walking side by side, occasionally crossing or merging, but always together. "Pretty cool," Eli said simply. As they watched, a wave washed higher up the beach, erasing part of their tracks. Another wave would soon take more, until all evidence of their passage was gone. But they had walked this path together, that was what mattered. "Let's go eat," Naomi said, linking her arm through Eli's. After a moment's hesitation, she offered her other arm to Graham. He took it, feeling the warmth of her through the light fabric of her jacket. Together, the 3 of them walked back along the shore toward town, toward the small diner, where a corner booth waited for them, toward the beginning of whatever came next. The sun crested fully over the horizon, bathing everything in golden light. A perfect morning, a new day, a family finding its way forward, one step at a time. As they left the beach, Graham glanced back one last time at their footprints, already disappearing beneath the incoming tide. Some things weren't meant to last forever. Footprints in sand, moments in time, but the connections they were building, those could endure. Naomi squeezed his arm gently as if reading his thoughts. "Come on," she said. "Breakfast is waiting." He smiled and turned away from the ocean, focusing instead on the path ahead and the people walking it with him. His son, the woman he'd never truly forgotten. His family found at last. Together they headed for the diner, ready to solidify their small promise once more. Epilogue. Letters home 6 weeks later. Graham sat at his desk in Seattle, rain pattering against the windows. The city sprawled grey and wet beyond the glass, but inside a small lamp cast a warm circle of light on the polished wood. Before him lay a blank sheet of paper and a pen. He'd been staring at it for 10 minutes, trying to find the right words. Eli had deployed 3 days ago. No details about where he was going or what he'd be doing, just a brief text. Heading out. "We'll be in touch when possible." Graham touched the leather bracelet on his wrist, the tiny anchor cool against his fingers. Then he began to write, "Dear Eli, I'm sitting in my office in Seattle watching the rain and thinking of you. Wherever you are, I hope you're safe. I hope you know how proud I am, not just of your service, but of who you are as a person. Your mother called yesterday. She's back home in Oakland now, but already planning her trip for your return. She mentioned that the pier, breakfast tradition should continue in her city. Sometimes, apparently, there's a diner by the bay that makes pancakes almost as good as our place in Coronado. I've been thinking about that morning on the beach, our footprints in the sand walking side by side. Some philosopher, whose name I can't remember, said something about how you never step in the same river twice because it's always changing. I think families are like that too, always changing, always growing, but still fundamentally the same. I missed the beginning of your story, but I'm grateful to be here for this chapter and whatever comes next. Write when you can. Your mother and I will be here waiting to hear from you, ready to pick up wherever we left off. Until then, know that you're in my thoughts every day. Take care of yourself out there. Love." Dad. Graham looked at the last word, surprised by how natural it felt to write it. Dad. A title earned not by biology alone, but by showing up, by being present, by choosing to love. He carefully folded the letter and slipped it into an envelope. Tomorrow he would mail it to Naomi, who would forward it to Eli's military address when it was secure to do so. On his desk stood a framed photograph. Eli, Naomi and himself on that last morning before deployment, sitting in their regular booth at the diner. A waitress had taken it for them, capturing a moment of simple happiness. Graham touched the frame lightly, then reached for his phone. He sent a quick text to Naomi. Letter on its way tomorrow. First Sunday next month. Her reply came a few minutes later. Wouldn't miss it. Same time, different pier. Outside, the rain continued to fall, but Graham barely noticed. His mind was already on next month's meeting, the continuation of a tradition they were building together, one breakfast at a time. He smiled as he tucked the letter into his briefcase. Some promises were easy to keep when they mattered this much. The end